Sandpaper do we have available in the shop, and what order do we use them?
Okay, so what grit, just to get a review, what grit sandpaper do we have and what order do we use them? So we have 80, we have 120.
So we go to 240 and then we go down because the higher the number, the more rougher the material is.
Yeah, I'm going to go over that in a second. So we have 80, 120, 120, 180, and then 220. Okay. So 80, 120, 180, 220. Now again, they're slightly different colors, but they're all red. So unless you memorize it, which I don't have to memorize, you're better off looking on the back. Okay. So here on the back it says your grit size. So whatever your grit, this is 180. So this right here would be one of your last steps. So again, just to review, you start from the lowest and work to your highest. You go with or against the grain? With the grain, right? So you start, spend most time with your 80, and then you bump up to 20. And by the time you get to 220 with hand sanding, you should only have to spend 5 minutes apiece sanding. Okay. And when you guys do that, so 80 with the palm sander, so the quick way that you guys all want to use, 80 with palm sander, 120 with palm sander, and 180 with palm sander. So you should be using a palm sander for the majority of the project. Then, what makes it easier if you take with 220, take a scrap piece of wood, wrap the sandpaper around here. This was my legs, obviously I would sand before. And then I would sand this way, right? What's one of the benefits of using a block?
It keeps it square.
Yeah, it keeps it square and you get a nice flat surface, right? The whole face of the block is flat, whereas compared to your fingers, you got all those bumps and ridges and everything. And you're really only pressing down. When you sand by your hand, and the majority of the time you're only sanding with your fingertips, okay? So with a block, you get to cover more area, you get a better result. Okay. One of the other things that I want you guys to know that when you are, this is your leg assembly here. What's the next step that you guys start working on?
The long legs.
Sides, right? So long sides. Now, what you end up doing is make sure that you have you only measure your long sides and be following those material processing plans as well as what the actual pictures look like. Okay. So if you have a question, look at the pictures. My suggestion to you guys is to actually use a steel ruler when you guys are working with your sides, because you end up getting a better result. You don't have the flimsiness of the actual tape measure. So check to make sure that you're measuring, leave it a little bit long. And do we use the radial arc saw or the chop saw?
Chop saw.
Why the chop saw?
They don't go out.
Yeah, so it actually makes a square cut because the radial arc saw is for rough cuts. It's a little bit older, so it tends to be out of square. So for your long sides, make sure you guys use a steel ruler. With that, I want to point out that these are starting to get a little flimsy because people tend to just get bored and do this sort of stuff. Okay, so I know it's fun, but only use it for measuring. Don't be making noise. If you want to wrinkle things up, I'll get you a piece of paper. Play with that. Okay, so just be careful because, like I said, it's hard to measure. First off, it's hard to measure with the tape measure in here to get an accurate reading because it bends. But if you end up crinkling it more, doing this sort of stuff, you actually weaken it, and it's harder to take an even more accurate reading. Okay. So again, just use these just for tape measures, not for noisemakers or for crinkling. The other thing that I wanted to, one last thing quick, is one person might find a surprise in their locker from Woods 2. It's the person who is on the far side of the lockers, closest to the lumber rack, like all the plywood, and on the bottom shelf closest to the wall. There's a spindle in there. It dropped from the woods to people, dropped down into your locker. So I'll point that out again once we're out in the lab. But if you find one of these things in your locker, just let me know and I'll give it back to the woods one or woods two. I think that's it.
Yours?
Yeah. Was it locked?
Turned into like a.
Yeah, it was locked.